You're listening to the Cash Flow Academy podcast with Andy Tanner, your source for investing made easy. Here's Andy Tanner.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Academy podcast, where investing is made simple. I'm your host, Andy Tanner. It's wonderful to have you joining us for this episode. And once again, we have an amazing guest. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to be speaking with Shelle Rose Charvet. And she's a persuasion expert. And as some of you may or may not know, this is one of my favorite topics, if not number one. She is the author of Words That Change Minds, Mastering the Language of Influence. And the customer is bothering me. How to change attitudes, improve results, and grow your business. We're going to talk a little bit more about her background as we get going. But Shelle, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you, Andy.
This is exciting. So as we begin, the reason I'm grateful to have you with us is there are skills for hire, and then there's life skills. And it's fun to, draw a little Ben Franklin T or a little T that says, okay, what are the skills I want to have and what do I want to hire? Root canal, definitely skill for hire. Delivering a baby, skill for hire. I don't want to do those things. But when it comes to money, is that something you want to hire out to other people? And here's another one. When it comes to your ability to persuade, is that a life skill? I want to be able to tie my shoes, brush my teeth. Well, those aren't skills for hire. But persuasion is not something that's taught alongside history and physics and math, most of the time. And it's a massive topic. And so this is going to be a valuable conversation, very valuable, for anyone who says, gee, I wonder how people start with nothing and build something amazing. How is it that a person in any country can go from rags to riches, from going with absolutely nothing in their pocket? How do these people begin? What is the skill I need first? And I will tell you that this is the number one skill of the entrepreneur. It is the number one skill of the investor, and it is the skill that a person would start with. As I raise my sons, as they express their aspirations to become entrepreneurs, I say, boys, because I have girls. Unfortunately, I tried for one, but we ran out of gas. I got too old. But I say, boys, this is the skill you start with, is dealing with people. Because every dollar you will ever earn and every value you ever offer is going to be received by people. And all that value you give is going to be to others. It's going to be a service to others. The journey of entrepreneurship is serving other people, giving them value. And when you can explain that, only when they see the value is greater than what you receive, it always has to be in their favor, and it's hard for people to see that. So when you can explain your position and the value you can bring to a person's life, that is when you can begin to go from nothing, absolutely nothing, to something. So with that backdrop, Shelle, tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you and attracted you to wanting to study and teach and help people improve their persuasion skills.
I have been in the business of helping people communicate for over 35 years. I am a communication skills trainer and speaker, and I was working in France. I lived there for several years. I worked all over the world teaching things like negotiation, conflict resolution. And then it occurred to me that beneath all of those specific applications, like how to have a conversation with somebody when you disagree, which is something I think we need a lot more right now.
Yes.
Beneath all of those skills is the ability to persuade. So I got very interested in what are the things going on below the surface. So my actual expertise are in subconscious or below conscious motivation triggers. Each person, depending on the situation, because it's not about personality, but depending on the situation, has a different way of thinking about things, and it shows up both in their behavior and their language and their behavior. And if you understand that and you're able to go to their bus stop and use language and processes that are motivating for them, they're much more likely to want to get on your bus. And then you can solve problems, solve conflicts, negotiate, persuade. So that's what I've focused on. And you can use it in mediation, all kinds of ways. You can use it in coaching people to become better at the things they're already good at or solve the problems they need to solve. So that's what I got fascinated with. And I love language. I speak several languages, and it's embedded in how we speak. So people are revealing their motivation triggers without even knowing it. And someone who's learned a bit about this, and you're absolutely right, we never learned people skills, and we never learned advanced skills about listening to people and figuring out what is it that's important to them. So that's what's been motivating me for over 30 years now.
What's exciting is this field, when people think about persuasion and influence, they think about Slick Willie and step right up and come look at this car. But the neuroscience that has been expanded on the idea of what makes a human brain make a decision and understanding the neurotransmitters and the things that happen. And when you speak about, words that change minds, words have a profound effect. It's interesting that we're really a human pharmacy. We have epinephrine, we have adrenaline, we have dopamine, we have all these neurotransmitters that make us feel different ways. These are triggered by words. So rather than having a syringe to pump someone full of adrenaline, you could do it with words. Rather than having a syringe that pumps someone with oxytocin. You look at oxytocin. The bonding hormone between mother and child, or between a couple, words can bring that out, and it's fascinating. And the order of words. I'll give an example. I could look at someone's report card and say, "Gee, son, I see you have 4 A's, but here's this F." Or I could say, "Gee, son, I see this F, but wow, you've got 4 A's." I said the same thing in just a different order. And yet the feeling in that child is 100% different neurologically when I say, "Gee, you had 20 points, but you had 4 turnovers." But I say, "Well, you did have the 4 turnovers, but wow, look at the 20 points." Same thing, but different words. So as you study this, it's a fascinating thing. So where does a person begin? We have your book, Words That Change Minds. What are some of the highlights of what a person learns and what you teach in terms of the power of these words?
Where you start is a really, really good question. Would you be okay, Andy, if I decoded your question in terms of motivation triggers, then answered it?
If you ask me permission to do so, I suppose I have to say yes.
It'd be hard to say no for that question.
Pretty good stuff.
When someone's talking, already you want to be listening not only to what they're saying, but as you said, how they say it. And you said, where do you start? You didn't ask me, what are all the ways you can use this? You said, where do you start? And that means in your head at this moment, because it's not about personality, it's about what's motivating you right now. At this moment, you're looking for what are the steps you have to go through? Like, where do you start? Presupposes a first step, then a second step, then a third step, etc. So in order for me to answer your question properly, both in terms of what you asked for and how you want the information, I need to speak in a process. Sorry, you can hear I'm Canadian now. I didn't say process. I said process. So the first step that I would look at is, what am I trying to accomplish? What's important to me? And what's important to the other person? Because often when we're persuading somebody, we're just thinking about what we want. We're not necessarily thinking about what's important to the other person. And you've heard of the golden rule.
Yes.
The golden rule is do unto others as you would have done unto you. Well, when it comes to interpersonal communication, there's something I like to call the platinum rule. And it's the opposite of the golden rule. So this is step number 1, the platinum rule. Do unto others as they would have done unto them. And that's based on the theory that everyone is different. Do unto others as they would have done unto them, not as you would have done unto you.
I love this starting point, Shelley. I really do, because when you're in a basketball or football game, you start in the proper position. And the word posture comes from the word posistus, which means position. And a lot of people misinterpret this idea of starting out with a posture, as you've discussed, because they think posture is some type of intellectual prowess or financial prowess or one-upsmanship or leverage. But really, if you were to picture someone in a lake of water and another person on the land with a life preserver, one person is a position that needs help and the other person is a position to serve. And we ask, what does that person need? Well, the problem is, I think most of us in persuasion, we start in the water about what we want chasing a credit card. And we wind up in
Right.
quicksand chasing that credit card. But what really gives a person power is exactly what you said. I could not agree more, is that when I start to understand what this person wants, that is actually where I'm in the proper position of service. And that's where you gain power. I couldn't agree more.
And you gain power, but you also gain rapport and trust and credibility. And I think that you need all of those things. People need to believe what you're saying. That's credibility. They need to think your intentions are honorable. That's trust. And you need to have a process so that they can feel comfortable that you know what you're doing. So if somebody contacts you about something, for example, just very concrete, and say, how much is this service or product from you? Most people make this mistake of answering that question. And sometimes, I mean, in terms of consulting or some of the services that I offer, I don't know. I need to know what's important to the person. And so I'll repeat back their words so they know I heard them. You're interested in finding out the price of this product. May I ask you what purpose it will serve for you? What do you need to do by having this product? So I want to go to the goal of the goal. So their goal was find out the price. And I want to ask about what's the goal of the goal.
This is fantastic. You know, people come to any given situation with a specific context, and whatever's introduced that context is really interpreted that way. And by asking the questions that you ask, you help them, you're helping them focus and come to realizations about what they really want. And I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and there's a series of questions that not only reveal what someone wants, but how they're thinking about it, so then you know how to present the answer. So if I continue with this one just for a moment. So a person says, how much is this? And you say, oh, can I ask you, what is it you want it for? What are you trying to accomplish? And I like to switch to the phone after about the second email, because then you can have a real conversation. But let's imagine it happens on email. And they come back and they say, well, I need it to do X, Y, Z. My next question is, why is that important to you? This is a critical question. It's not, why do you have this problem? What's your excuse for this? It's, why is that important to you? And we need to listen for two types of answers. Either the person will say what they want to get, achieve, gain, or what benefit they'll have. In other words, what we call moving towards something, or they'll talk about a problem they want to avoid, prevent, solve, and get away from. So we're listening. Does the person want to move towards something or move away from something? When I say, oh, so why is that important to you? Well, I have this problem and I'm not sure what to do about it, but I've got to do something about it and I don't know what the answer is, and it looks like you might have the answer. Or they might say, well, I want to invest in this because I know you can get this and this and this, and it's going to improve my life in these ways, and I'll get a return on this investment. That's all toward language. So it's not about positive or negative. It's about what in someone's mind and their heart are they moving towards in their thinking or moving away from. And if you actually want to have an impact with this person, you need to know what is important to them, which was the answer to what are you trying to achieve through this product, or what do you want? Then they'll tell you what's important. Why is that important? It tells you whether they're moving toward or away from.
It's as I listen to you speak, it's funny how when amateur sales or new salespeople, they are so concerned about getting what they want. I got to make this sale. I got to make this sale. I got to make this sale. Yeah. And they're almost, fearful that they don't get what they want, the sale, the credit card. And I just love the idea of a genuineness and a patience and a listen and to be a listener to find out what those things are. I've heard it said that the value of I've often said this in my sales seminars is, value's in the eye of the beholder, much like beauty. It depends on what I want. There's certain things I find valuable that others don't. And it was funny when I do my sales seminars, when people come, for maybe a 2 or 3 day seminar, I actually have them go out and sell stuff to strangers. And that's like the worst way to do it. Cold calling's terrible, but it's great exercise. And we'll send them out with maybe a product that's worth $20 and say, go for it. See what you can get for it. And the next day, we'll have some people that sold the product for $500, some for $50, some for $10, some didn't sell it at all. And what I found over and over and over is exactly what you've said, is the people that took the time to find out the depth, breadth, and cost of their problem were able to, it is almost that the value of their solution was exactly equal to the depth, breadth, and cost of the problem that person wanted to solve.
Yeah.
And
you're
without,
absolutely right.
Without that listening and without that helping. So if I were going to want, so let me ask this. Let's say I want to interrupt Sure.
for just a second.
No, go ahead.
I want to violently agree with you that in sales, if there is an urgent problem, people will be more willing to buy now than if something is merely important. And that is why in a sales process, if you can find out if there is a problem that they want to fix, avoid, or solve, that will get you a shorter time frame to make a sale than if the person has a goal that they want to move towards. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you can't tell. And so what I call the divine strategy when you're talking to someone, once you found out their needs, is away from toward, problem, solution. So if you don't want XYZ to keep happening, or if you want XYZ to never happen again, then I suggest this solution because it will enable you not only to avoid that problem, but to gain this benefit.
Fabulous. Fabulous. What is the difference between persuading someone and selling? Do you think there's a difference there?
I think that everybody sells and everybody persuades, because we all would like someone to believe what we believe. And unfortunately, I think that's the root cause at some levels of all the, political and visceral disagreements that people have, is that we fundamentally think that people that have a different point of view are wrong and want to persuade them. And we don't always have to do that. But for me, persuasion and selling is something that is such a daily occurrence that they're fundamental life skills. I was about to say basic, but it's not basic, because Lord knows it's not easy. But it's fundamental to know how to do that. And most people do what you say, is that they start from their point of view about what's important to them. And particularly if you want to have a good relationship with somebody, sometimes your goal shouldn't be to persuade. Your first goal should be to understand.
I think this is a fundamental misunderstanding of what sales is. There's a fundamental misunderstanding, and it comes from a very unhealthy selfishness, is that when people come to my sales seminars, they're coming wanting to get the skills to get what they want. And it's all about, how do I get people to do what I want, as if I wanted a remote control that could control other people. And what a person will find out very, very quickly if they get good at this, it is exactly quite the opposite. As you become a servant of other people. And as I go through the neuro-linguistic programming stuff and all the words and the neuroscience and the fun stuff that actually does give you a tremendous amount of control, people will often say, Shelle, do you use this on your wife? And that stage right there tells me exactly where their marriage is.
Yeah.
when they say
that.
Well,
I've got something funny to tell you about just that thing. When you use it on people as opposed to using your skills with people to have a better relationship. One of the pieces of software I've developed that your audience may be interested in, although I'm not so sure because I suspect most of your audience are men, not women, I've developed an app. Right now it's a web app. You can't download it yet, but you should be able to in a couple weeks. And this app is called Husband Motivator. And if you go to husbandmotivator.com, you can learn what's motivating your husband in different contexts, and you get a formula for being more persuasive.
And
the idea is that your relationship improves because you know how to speak to him. Now, if you're a guy, we don't have Wife Motivator yet. It's coming, but you could just imagine it says she where it says he. And it's free to use, husbandmotivator.com.
That is awesome.
And you can figure out what's motivating him or her. Yeah.
Well, to circle, to bring that first circle, it's interesting because when they say, well, do you use these skills you have on your wife? I says, well, of course I do, because that's how I find out what she wants.
Right.
And they
Right.
say, well, when you go into your language patterns, does she recognize? I go, it's wonderful if she does, because it goes much faster, because I've developed a history of, as soon as I begin those patterns, if she does recognize me, she says, wait a minute, Andy has a history of putting my wants first. That's how you have a good marriage. A good marriage doesn't happen by always getting what I want. A good marriage happens when I find out what she really wants and give it to her. And that's what you want to do to customers. That's what you want to do to your employees. When you find out and your investors, people do things because they feel they're going to get what they want. But I think a lot of people lack clarity on what that might be.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you said something really good. When they say, well, how much is this? You say, well, wait a minute. Let's talk about what it is you really want. Because a person might start out thinking, well, I don't want to pay full price for this, or I don't want to spend a lot of money on this. That might be their thinking of what they think they want. But if you ask them certain questions and often allow them to reflect on other problems in their life, they might think, well, wait a minute, I would rather have quality over price.
Yeah.
It changed the
I'd rather trust the thing that, or the product or service that I'm buying.
going to get my
Would you
wife.
like to hear?
I'm going to get my wife the husband. I'm going to get my wife the husband motivator as soon as possible, because I want her to be able to I want to give her her way, for sure. Yeah. And we have a lot of women in our audience, but I think the men get it for your wife. So, continue.
Yeah, it'll make your life easier. It'll make your life easier. It'll be coming out in iOS and Android in a few weeks, but it's as a free app, and it's available right now as a free web app at husbandmotivator.com. And it's fun. And it gives you a 4-step motivating method that are based on your partner's triggers, like what's important to them in a specific context. So you choose what context.
Talk about what that is. Talk about what a trigger is. What is a trigger?
So a motivation trigger is what will make you do something or stop you from doing something in a given context. So, for example, toward and away from. If you're in a toward mode and you're bound and determined that you want something, I need to use toward language, which would be, here's how you get it. Here's how you get more of this. Here's the advantage or the benefit of that. When you're in away from trigger, there's stuff you want to avoid. It's really hard to deal with someone who's very resistant to what you want, or don't you hate it when you buy something and it doesn't do the thing you wanted it to do? So that's all away from language. But those are only 2 of the motivation triggers that are driving people in a different context.
But I would hate people to miss what you just said. I would hate it if anyone were to gloss over what you just said, because if they miss that, they're missing an absolute gold mine.
That was away from language that you just used. You just used language. Huge. I don't want you to miss this, right?
Absolutely. If you look at how our brains were built under the surface, neurologically, we share a lot of the same brain matter, limbic systems that, a rat has or a snake has. And if you go out into Africa and the Serengeti, there are certain things that draw animals towards something, reproduction, food, but there are certain things that push animals away from things. Getting eaten is a primary one. And human beings, I want everyone to understand what Shelle's saying. Human beings, even though we have a cerebral cortex that's kind of advanced, we still share that basic, deep limbic system with all other human beings. So there are triggers, in other words, stimulus that trigger attractive responses and trigger repelling responses. And by understanding that, you're really messing with people's absolutely primal feelings with that towards and away trigger. I just felt it would be, I don't want people to miss how valuable just this first trigger is. Once our listeners understand this, it's going to bless their lives.
Yeah, I really think so. And the issue is, why it's difficult is that most of us are not aware of the kind of language we use. And we use language that represents how we're thinking and what we're motivated by in a given context. Like now that I'm talking with you on the radio, on the podcast. And, that's one of the things, it's one of the reasons I rewrote and added in a bunch of stuff. I got a 3rd edition of my book.
This is the 3rd edition.
Came out a few weeks ago.
Yep, this is the 3rd edition.
the neuroscience now supports what we knew from neuro-linguistic programming and other areas about these triggers. So there's toward and away from. There's another few that are really, really important for A, interpersonal communication, and B, persuasion. And that is, how does a person judge things? Do they judge things based on what's important to themselves and their own standards, their own criteria, or do they need outside influences and information? So is a person in an internal mode where I decide based on what's important to me, or have they gone external and they say, well, what do you think? What is everybody else doing? Critical, because of course, if someone is more external, specifically to you, it's more easy to persuade them. You say, hey, I think you should do this. And they go, okay, great. Most people do not say that, particularly at home in your family. So you need to take a different approach with someone who's in internal, they decide for themselves and don't want to be told what to do, than you do with someone who cares about what other people think about that thing.
So,
and again, you can hear it's contextual. It's not a personality thing.
So the thing that strikes me about that trigger is the title of your book, that it's the words that change minds, is, being able to understand whether they're in internal, external mode. That's has very little to do about what the words you use are. It has much to do by listening to what the words they're using. Yes? I mean, this is a listening skill, maybe even more than a speaking skill. It's like I'm going to go read words that change minds because I'm going to find super language. But I'm hearing, so far, your two ears are as equally valuable a tool as the mouth. Yes?
Oh, absolutely. Because how would you know what to say unless you have an idea of how that person thinks?
Their
Otherwise,
context.
You're just sort of flinging spaghetti at a wall. And some of it might stick, but some of it wouldn't. And that's why the concept of the bus stop for me is so important. How do you get to someone else's bus stop? If they're internal and you're enthusiastic, hey, I saw this movie. It's the best movie all year. You're going to love it. Well, if you happen to be very internal about movies and you don't particularly respect my opinion, you're going to get a little resentful because I'm so enthusiastic, it's as if I'm telling you what to think before you've even seen the movie. We do this to our spouses all the time. You should read this book. You're going to love it. What? That's the best way to get somebody to say, I don't think so. So I would love to give people a suggestion for how they can make suggestions that are very powerful, even for highly, highly internal people who don't want to be told what to do, like your spouse, right?
Right. Fantastic.
And what we suggest then is always think about what's motivating the other person. And when someone's internal, they want to judge for themselves. So that's what we need to do. So my suggestion would be, instead of saying, you're going to love this movie, just talk from your heart and say, hey, I loved this movie, and I'm curious to know what you would think about it. I enjoyed this book. I got a lot out of it, and I'd like to know what you would think about it.
Shows a lot of respect, right? I mean, really.
Yeah, I don't have to tell other people what to do, particularly if they don't want it, right?
Yeah, for sure. So as you go through, there's the big picture, which I think is the most important picture always, right? There's the big picture. But let's talk about, people, they want the minutia often. So let's give a couple of practical applications. Things that I'm going to put you in some situations that people find themselves in where they've been frustrated, and I'm going to give you the chance to kind of show them your magic and how this would work. Okay. Let's say that I make a call, and I want someone to return that phone call, and I just seem like I make these calls, I leave messages, or I leave them with someone's assistant, and I'm just not getting anyone to return my call. What's the best way to get someone to call me back?
Oh, I'm so happy you asked that.
Did I serve that up on a platter?
I have two solutions that I have 2 or 3 solutions. 3. I got 3 solutions. I have 3 options for you about that.
Okay.
So, number 1, if you have spoken to the person before and they're not calling you back, this happens a lot. You do a great open as a salesperson, and then for some reason you can't get traction. And it's usually because people are way too busy, and you didn't, for some reason, manage to get in the urgent file in their brain. Okay, so you're not top. You're not the most
Top of
the
mind.
biggest thing that's screaming at them.
Yeah.
So you can phone them back and make sure you phone them when you know they're not going to pick up the phone, which is most of the time now, and say, that problem we discussed. I've been thinking, and I've got a suggestion for you to consider. Can you give me a call back?
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So what you're doing is you're inciting curiosity. Now, you do have to have all of that. You have to have thought about the problem. Make sure you repeat the problem and the consequence. So, that problem you were telling me about that was impacting your business negatively in this specific way. I've been thinking about it, and I have an idea that I'd like to run by you. Can you give me a call?
Now, that's very powerful, because the secret in what you did is you did not reveal the idea. And see, that's where I think people would struggle. Say, well, I have this solution. This is what it is. But when you say, hey, I have an idea. I think it solves this problem. Give me a call. Now you've left them with curiosity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to just give you a little testimonial, because I know this works. And I'll give you a real world example. Is my sister, she went through a tough time, kind of going through a transition of job. She's looking for a job, and she's a very good personal assistant. These virtual assistants. She doesn't do it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But she was great. And so I have all these business contacts, and I have two choices. I can say, hey, everyone, my sister's looking for a job. Here's her skill set. Call me if you're interested in giving my sister a job. But instead, what I did is I sent out an email to my database. This was so much fun. And the subject of the email was my secret weapon. And in the email I said, a lot of you as my friends and colleagues have asked me how I run so many businesses, get so many things done, and am able to make so much money in a secret time. The reason I do this is I have a secret weapon. If you want to know what that is, email me back.
Right.
And so, I had two choices. Either tell them who my sister is and list all the credentials, or I say, hey, do you want to have your business built and all your problems solved? If so, email me. And it works.
Yeah.
It
and
really does work.
You're going to the problem. You're going to what does somebody need, or what is the opportunity here. So that's one way. Another way is you phone them up when they're not going to be there. Mm-hmm. And this is only if you know them. This is the funny solution. And you tell them you have a joke for them that you think they might love, and hang up the phone.
Oh, jeez.
Now, you do have to have a joke that you think they might love. I have lots of jokes, actually. So that's one way to do it. And it gets people to laugh, and they call you back. And then the third way is where you apologize because you think you might have offended them. Mm-hmm. And again, you phone them up when they're not going to be there, and you say, listen, we had thought about, we had agreed to get together and have another conversation, and I've called you a couple times and you haven't gotten back, and I'm afraid I said or did something that might have offended you. And it wasn't my intention to offend you. Maybe you're too busy and I misunderstood, but I'm afraid that I did something, and I'm terribly sorry. And then basically end the conversation there. And people will call you back or email you back and say, no, I've been too busy. And they feel a little guilty. So chances are they'll be open to actually the next step in the next meeting. So those are three different ways that I use to get people to call you back. And the issue is they're too busy. And if you haven't really made your case for why they should talk to you, it's hard to get them motivated.
Now, there's an old saying, and I don't worry too much about this, but and I don't know that this is necessarily true. So I'm not going to endorse it because I actually don't think it's true, but I'm going to say it anyway because I get this a lot when I do my sales and influence stuff, and I'm really interested to know how someone who more experienced than me, published a couple times over would handle this because I know how I do it, but I'm curious to know how you would do it. There's a saying, it says a tactic known as a tactic blown, right? A tactic known as a tactic blown, because the theory is well, if they know my tactic, now they know what I'm after, and it loses its juice. So let's say you get two people like me, where I would lose the chess match, so to speak, but in a way I'd win it because you'd be focused on what I want. But the listeners will notice that when I'm speaking, you'll often say, okay, Andy, what you just said was this, and what that means is this is where you're at. So you have a processor that you've trained yourself to do listening on a different level. Most people, when they listen, they're kind of preparing the next thing they're going to say, but you're truly listening to say, based on what Andy says, well, this is what he wants. So the question is this: people come up and say, well, what if people start recognizing that? What if people start saying, oh, that's just a tactic that, these people have studied NLP. What about that? Do you ever have people that notice this stuff? So what? How do you deal with that?
I have a story to tell you, because I'm the queen of this material. It's called the Language and Behavior Profile. I'm probably the world expert in this. I don't mean to brag. It's very un-Canadian to do this, so don't tell anybody I said that. But when somebody gets it right, it works, particularly if your sincerometer goes off and you trust them as a person. Well, one of the other triggers that we haven't talked about, we mentioned it briefly at the very beginning, is does someone want lots of options and alternatives, or do they want to have a straightforward, step-by-step process to go through to buy something or to make a decision? So I'm at home one day, and the carpet cleaners are going to come. And I'm ready for these guys, because I know they're always trying to upsell you. But we're not going to get upsold. I'm the queen of this material. We are not getting upsold. So the guy comes around, and you know what they do when they're going to clean your carpet? They lift up the legs of your sofa and stick a little cardboard thing underneath so they can clean your carpet. And while he's doing that, he says to me, and I was waiting for him. He said to me, your sofa could use a clean. And I said, I know, but we're not going to do it today. You can hear I'm really internal. I just thought. And he says, oh, okay, that's a pity, because since I'm already here and we don't have to come back, I can do it for half price. So that's an option. People in an options mode will buy when they get a special deal.
Nice.
And some people won't buy unless they get a special deal.
Nice.
So who got their sofa cleaned? Ask. So, and I know this stuff. And I heard it when it came out of his mouth, but it still seemed irresistible to me. Yeah, why wouldn't I want my sofa cleaned after all?
That's awesome. So keep going.
It can work. It can work. Just the thing that doesn't work, and this is why people are suspicious, is when somebody appears to be using some kind of smarmy sales technique. Like all our alarm bells go off. Like, smarmy is not how you want to be. You want to be genuinely interested in someone.
I think that's a great answer. When I find someone, I'll tell you how I react. I don't know how everyone will react. I just don't know. But I'll tell you how I react. When I see someone that has studied sales, and I see someone that has listening skills like you do and so forth, I actually become more trusting of that person, because it's where you start at the beginning of the conversation. Your interest is to find out what I want. And I often will allow that person to process me to find out what I want, because I know I'm a human being, and that I don't always know what I want. And I've very much enjoyed purchasing as a purchaser. These things have helped me as a purchaser because they help me buy things that help me. And I know the salesman, if they're really good, they're not gonna sell me something that I really wouldn't want. A lot of people have said this, and I think this is unfortunate. They say, Andy, you're so good, you could sell ketchup to a lady in white gloves. I said, why would I want to do that? Because, if she's wearing white gloves, she might stain them. Why would I want to? Or someone says, Andy, you could sell an ice cube to an Eskimo. And I says, you know what, they have plenty of ice. Why would I do that? And people don't understand. They're so selfish in their brains they don't realize that if you close 10% of your sales, you're going to be a millionaire, okay? You're going to be a millionaire. And anywhere you go, if you get 10% of your sales, you're going to be a millionaire. And so you get to be selective in who you sell to. People that can't sell think selling is so hard and customers so scarce. And if you just serve and find a genuineness to these tactics, that these tactics are not self-serving, they are mutually serving, I think it's a great thing. Let's talk about this type of sale. So you sell someone, and it doesn't work out for them, and now they're angry. So here's another real world scenario, not calling me back. Here's another real one. I'm angry. I bought, you know what? Doggone it. I bought the words that changed mastering my, and I'm upset. I don't like this. So now I'm an angry customer. How are you going to deal with the angry customer?
That is the whole point of why I wrote my second book, called The Customer is Bothering Me, because most people are trained to stay calm and professional when the other person is losing it on the end because they're outraged by something.
Yeah.
People don't just get angry for no reason. They're way too busy. They've got way too much to do. And if the thing they bought doesn't work, like my printer wasn't working today, like, do I have time to take it to the shop? No, I just want it to work. Right? So people get apoplectic when they're on the phone with other people or in email. And the exact wrong thing to do is to stay calm. And what most people forget when they're dealing with angry customers is they forget what it's like to be an outraged customer. So it's not really customer rage, it's customer outrage. And we all know when we're outraged, we want somebody to hear what the problem is and to let us get it off our chest. And there's a rule about this situation that I developed that I realize it's obvious, but we forget it. It's so obvious. Is people cannot do these two things at the same time. They can't be upset and logical. So if I try to solve my customer's problem, that's logical, while they're upset, they can't go there with me. Mm-hmm. So if somebody's really upset, I've got to go and be upset on their behalf. What? You got billed 3 times for the same thing? I've got to go into shock, horror, and dismay and then bring them down. I can't say, I'm very sorry you received a bill 3 times, Mr. Smith. You can't say that. Mr. Smith is annoyed or he's furious. So you have to get upset on his or her behalf and then bring it down.
It's brilliant.
And so I developed a 4-step process to show you how to go and get them and bring them down. You can't solve their problem if they're upset.
It's absolutely brilliant. You know, there's an old saying that says, when emotion is high, intelligence is low. Oh,
I think that's true.
And if you question at all what Shelle's saying, think about this. You know, sweetheart, I'm really sorry I say that. I was just really, really angry or really, really upset. And the decisions we make, it doesn't even need to be anger. Often when a young lady will bring home that kid to her parents and she has emotional attachment to him, even though he's just been paroled, and you want to say, sweetheart, I don't know that you're thinking really rationally here. Well, she's thinking emotionally. She loves this man with his parole officer standing by. And what a wonderful tactic to find rapport with commonality. Well, you know what? You're upset. I'm upset too, because rapport is built through commonality. Rapport is destroyed through discord. So by mirroring that behavior, absolutely a brilliant. You know what? That's unacceptable. We can't have that in our company. There's no way. This is absolutely unacceptable.
It is, and that's exactly what it does. You see, if you stay calm, the customer believes a certain number of things. The customer is angry and outraged about something. If you stay calm,
you don't care.
You don't care, and this is a normal problem, and you've done nothing to fix it. You guys are totally incompetent.
It's brilliant.
Whereas if I'm upset on the customer's behalf, and I go into shock and dismay and commitment to doing something, then the customer knows, oh, this is an exception. This doesn't happen every day. This person is going to help me, and this person believes me, and I can trust them. So if you stay calm, you are in the business of destroying your customer relationship. If you get upset on their behalf, they are going to be your biggest promoter because you get upset and you do something about it.
Let's do one more real-world scenario. We've talked about, someone doesn't return a phone call. How to do that? Well, throw some curiosity out there. Boy, I've got a joke. You got to hear this, right? Unrelated to business. Let's say that you have an angry customer. We'll match their anger with your own. Well, this is unacceptable, right? Let's do a third one. Let's say a person is either A, looking to become a real estate investor, because we have many couples that want to do that listen. We also have many people who want to start a business, but there's 2 things that you have to have. If you're going to buy real estate, you got to raise money. So many of them look to raise money from private investors to begin. That's very common as beginner real estate investors. Or you might be like my friend Josh Lannon. He got out of rehab. Look at this. He has no high school diploma because he's kicked out. He's a drunk. His wife forces him into rehab. He comes out of rehab and he can't go back to the bar where he works, and he's got nothing. So he says, you know what? I'm a recovering alcoholic that has no high school diploma and no money, but trust me to invest in my new rehab center project. Okay, I can't think of a better scenario of something with nothing. So this guy ends up turning, millions and millions of dollars in several rehab centers. But how does he raise that money? How do you go to someone and say, look, I have no money, but I have a good idea. If you give me your money, I can give you a return. How would you go about raising money if you were starting a new business?
I don't know that I would have advice for anybody that's in your friend's situation, because the two big things that you need to do, he must have figured out some magic way to do them. And one is to establish trust and rapport. And the second thing is credibility. Like, this person can pull it off. They can do what they have to do. I don't know what miracle he pulled, but those are the two things you've got to do. And now sometimes you do this by having a very compelling business case, like with a great idea, and you can prove it, you've got returns, and people have confidence in your ability to actually action your business plan. And that's a judgment call. But you've got to have trust and rapport and credibility. And those are not only factual things, those are really emotional things. I'm a member of my local angel investor group here where I live. And one of the things that we do is when people come and give us a pitch about how, and it's kind of like a Shark Tank or Dragon's Den or some of those things, only it's friendly. And we ask them questions. And one of the things we're trying to determine is their idea a good one? But secondly, we're trying to determine whether the founder is the right kind of person to invest in. And we've got really clear criteria, because we don't just fling money at somebody as an angel investor group. We actually want to participate and help them succeed. So in our group of about 100 people, there's a lot of different people with different skills. And so we're trying to assess not only the idea, but the person. And one of the things that that I really helped the group with, because I think this is an important criteria, and they ended up agreeing, is that if the founder is not what we call in the innovation space coachable, that means they're too internal. So if you give them some information or some advice that's going to help them, do they actually think about it and action it? Or do they just say, oh, no, I already know I'm doing everything right? That's a no-go. Right? But you don't want somebody you don't want someone who doesn't know anything, but you want somebody who is willing to take in outside information. So every area has a set of criteria that you're either consciously or unconsciously looking for. And if you want to convince somebody to invest in you, you need to know how they make decisions, consciously or unconsciously.
It's really fun. Just to remind everyone, we're speaking with Shelle Rose Charvet. Incredible persuasion expert, spent many, many years in the field. Her book is Words That Change Minds, Mastering the Language of Influence, and Customers Bothering Me, How to Change Attitudes, Improve Results, and Grow Your Business. I want to take a minute before we continue and talk about your website, because I know at this point, many people are like, boy, I'd like to learn more about this. I mean, if you're smart, you can kind of see something about Shelle is she's a lot like Neo in the Matrix. Neo doesn't see the agents anymore. He just sees those ones and zeros now. He just sees the code. And
that was one of my favorite movies.
Well,
it really was.
It's got such great metaphor. But the reality is, your processor, anyone who's really studied influence, you can tell that the way they process information is really different. They see the world and communication through a different lens of listening for different things, observation. If I could offer a metaphor from some great Canadians, probably the best band ever is called Rush. They are Canadian. Yeah. And it's an interesting thing, because they have the greatest drummer in the world. His name is Neil Peart. And as a drummer, if you can catch this metaphor, listeners, you'll understand the power Shelle has. As a drummer, I will listen to their famous song. Number one song they ever had was Tom Sawyer. And there's an interesting point in that song where he switches from 4/4 time to 7/8 time. Now, unless you're a drummer, you would never catch that. You would never notice it. But if you are a drummer, it sticks out like a sore thumb. You can't miss it. And this is much how Shelle is with language, is there are things you're saying, there are things I am saying that she is processing at a very high level because of practice and experience, but she's gleaning information that most people don't see. You know, just like that song, most people don't see the time change, the time signature change. But, you know, most people as they're speaking don't realize, well, they're revealing, like in the example here, well, Andy, based on what you said, I can see you want to start at the beginning point. That's where you are. Or based on what you said, I can see you're open to outside information being judged. And if you can just imagine for a moment, if you just picked up a simple book, Words That Change Minds, if you can just imagine for a moment, beginning to develop that skill, the advantage you have as a parent, as a husband or as a wife, as a life partner, as a business owner, as a leader, as a coach, as all the roles you fill, having the ability to do that, it's amazing. You know, a person goes to get a medical degree for $200,000 in student loans, and yet you can have incredible superpowers, because it is a superpower that you have, for a few dollars at Amazon.com. So I highly recommend you do this. And let's break here just a sec. Tell me about the Institute for Influence.com. Can you share with me what I receive when I go there?
So, you know, Andy, you said, what's your website? And I went, because my problem is I've got too many ideas, and all entrepreneurs have this issue. And it's a showstopper for a lot of people, because if you don't complete and finish one idea, it's no good having 5 great ideas. So right. I do have a few projects going on. And at the Institute for Influence, I've developed a 6-month online influence training program so that people can really up their game in knowing how to do all these skills. And the beauty of it is it takes 0 time. It's 15 minutes a day. 15 minutes a day, you get one insight, and you get an application. At the end of every 5 to 7 minute video, you're invited to do one thing, to apply what you just learned. And on a scale of difficulty, the application task is, if difficult is 10 and easy is 1, it's a 2 or a 3. So total time per day takes 15 minutes. And this is where you learn to really listen at that deeper level, to know how to create rapport instantly, to know how to manage your own emotions when you're in communication, and to master these skills. And it's kind of like an MBA in people skills. And so that's what we're offering at the Institute for Influence, and people can just go there and get information. The other thing that I wanted to tell people about is the thing you just said is so right. This is a master skill. It takes a while to master. That's why we developed a program over 6 months. Mm-hmm. But I also wanted to make it easier for people to use. And we will be launching this in a few weeks, maybe a couple months. Everything in software takes much longer than we'd like it. And we've developed a piece of software. It now has 2 U.S. patents that automatically decodes when someone sends you an email, what are their motivation triggers. Now, this is not for ordinary everyday email. Can you meet me at 4? No, I have to meet you at 2. This is for one of those emails and you go, oh dear, I better think about this before I answer. And it analyzes the motivation triggers that are in the language structure in the email. And then you can type a draft response, and our Libretta software will analyze your email against the one that came in and give you a fit score. How well did it fit? And anything over 50% is good to go. And it also gives you advice about what to change, what kind of phrasings. Now, of course, the software can't tell you what to say. You have to decide that for yourself, but it can tell you what language, what kind of language to use and what language to avoid. So if people want to contact me, maybe you can put my email up, the Success Strategies email. That's my consulting company. And I can put them on a list. And when it comes out, I'll let people know.
Absolutely fantastic. Fun. This is, again, one of my favorite topics. I have studied this topic more than real estate investing. I've actually studied this topic more than even I'm known as an options trader and a person who teaches options. I've actually studied this more than that topic. I love hanging out with people with your expertise. I learn so much. Absolutely fantastic. Any final words for our listeners? Any final counsel in this area of influence?
Well, I'd just like to encourage them. Now they really probably could pick up anybody who's using toward language or away from language already. right? They're going to be listening for whether people want something or want to avoid something. And then you can practice matching the language and see what difference it makes right away. Because this stuff doesn't have to be rocket science. You can pick up one pattern and begin to listen for it. And I think if you started that right away, you would see what a difference it makes for yourself.
Absolutely fantastic. Shelle, you've been so gracious with your time and to share these incredible techniques, not only in the broad sense, but also in the detailed sense of specific things and situations people fall into. And it's fun because the things you've shared have been time tested. You mentioned, your buddy has to pull off a miracle, but you're exactly right. Credibility. Aristotle wrote a book. You've got a 5-star book on Amazon. I've got a couple of 5-star books. Those probably won't be around in 500 years. Maybe yours will. I don't know that mine will. But,
I don't know about that. Yeah.
Aristotle wrote a book on rhetoric, and he talks about that credibility as one of the three, logic, emotion, and that credibility you spoke about. So, the things you share have been time tested. But you bring a simplicity to it. You bring a practicality to it that takes it not only from the big picture, but reduces it down to day-to-day things like, how do I get someone to call me back? How do I deal with an angry customer? The practicality of what you teach is, I think, what people will very much enjoy. So I hope we can have you on.
Thank you so much for this great conversation.
Yeah, I hope we can have you on again.
Yeah.
We'll see you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andy.
You've been listening to the Cash Flow Academy podcast. I'm your host, Andy Tanner. This is where investing is made simple. Number one skill of an entrepreneur is flat out being able to persuade people. The irony is that by helping people get what they want, you get the chance to get what you want. And so I hope this has been helpful. I hope you think a lot about whether this is a life skill or whether this is something that you think is a skill for hire. I think it's a life skill for the entrepreneur. So until next time, again, this is Andy Tanner. Thanks for listening to the Cash Flow Academy podcast.
You've been listening to the Cash Flow Academy podcast with Andy Tanner. For more information on investing made easy, go to thecashflowacademy.com.